time Chris and I were just knowing that I wanted to have a family, which is a whole other, like dynamic. It's
yeah, you have to make a lot of changes to life sometimes when you make that decision.
Well, you do. And it's also being a creative person. You kind of just need room, right, to do those things. And so for me, I felt like I needed to figure out something where I could have both. It's funny because I read this article once where they're like, you can't have it all. That was the title of it.
And none of us want to believe that.
No one wants to believe it, and you can try, and that's fine. But really, you have to compromise somewhere, if you want to be healthy, even though you kind of feel guilty on both sides. Because I never feel like, it's like, what do they say? You should on yourself or something. But I probably, if I wanted to not have a family life, maybe I could have stayed in documentary film, but I feel like it would have been really, really hard to do with a family and be fair to them and fair to me. And,
yeah, because you're traveling a lot probably. And
yeah.
Money's tight. We skipped over your whole Playboy life, which I feel like is also very interesting.
Well, this is actually a perfect segue because, I had some acquaintances from New York who ended up at Playboy to revamp it. Like they brought them in a new creative director and a new editorial director, Jimmy and Mac, and they brought them in to revamp the magazine and just make it more contemporary. And it had just become so stuck. It was like stuck in a funk, and stylistically and creatively, it really hadn't changed since, I guess, the 90s. I mean, some of it hadn't changed since the beginning, layout wise. So Jimmy and Mac asked me if I wanted to join the company and be the photo director.
And what point is this? What point is this?
After the movie.
Okay, got it.
So I went and worked for my friend Steve for a little while, who's also a character. He's sort of Steve's like, how would you describe Steve? He's like
James Bond without a spy job.
James Bond.
That's great.
Studio, and he used to call me Money Penny or Penny Money.
Money Penny.
Money Penny.
Money Penny. That means that's good.
And he drove an Aston Martin and was always dating beautiful women, and actually had a house that you'd walk up the steps and the whole wall was glass, so you could see into the swimming pool when people are swimming around.
Wow.
Because during parties, sometimes he would have models just swim around in the pool. I know this sounds so ridiculous. Like as I'm saying it, it's like, oh my gosh. And this coming for
it's such an interesting window. It's a window into such an interesting life that a lot of people never get to see. So I love all these stories.
No, the frivolousness though to me makes me blush, and I don't know why, because look, I totally love the guilty pleasures. Like I giggled, we would be in a corner at a party giggling about how ridiculous it was, and extravagant but it wasn't.
When can we get to coaching horses?
Yeah. When can we get to like the dive bar that we're really going to go hang out in after this? It was just, it was voyeuristic. So we're, just there as a part of this thing, but we're watching it go by. It just never felt like I was sitting in the middle of it.
Right. You were an observer, yeah. But I feel like I don't know why, maybe it's just because of the history of Playboy, but I feel like any sort of, if you're in that orbit at all, you're going to see some very extravagant and wild stuff. It has that reputation. Whether or not it's really like that, I don't know.
Well, I would say, so I did end up going and working at Playboy for 4 years as the photo director. And the idea was to revamp it and make it and modernize it and just make it more artful, just turn it into something like, and I started introducing the idea of female photographers shooting their friends and talking about that experience and what sexuality means to them. And putting a narrative to it that wasn't just the male gaze, like that it was women talking about the freedom of being able to own sexuality and like be sexual if you want to be and not be judged by it, So that was part of the dialogue that I was trying to spur while I was there. And, it was such an interesting time because Hef was still alive. There was old and new Playboy at the same time. And they were sort of fighting each other in a way because we just wanted to jump into it and do some crazy things and just have it be really artful, experimental. And, I think at one time I even proposed to the editorial director that we put this beautiful model named Anja on the cover who's transgender. And she is gorgeous. And most men would look at her and just never know that she was transgender. That was kind of shot down. But these were the things that we were exploring.
Right. Did you ever meet Hef?
Yeah. So his son Cooper was just
nice name.
Yeah, that's a good name. It's a cool name,
Yeah.
Cooper was hopping into. It was an interesting time because it was this transition time, and he was just starting to take over really, and start running the creative. But there are people in place, and it was unique. But Hef was hanging at home mostly. We still sent things over to him. So
he still had final approval?
Yeah. So, the pictures you see where Hef is sitting on his bed and there's all of these photos and, papers and things just all around, fanned out around him.
Yeah.
That's the deal. Like he woke up at 11, he had his silk pajamas on. I think by noon he had all the stuff from the magazine sent over. And he would sit in his room and go through it and handwrite notes on it and then send it back.
Wow.
And so, and then every once in a while I'd be in Mac's office and he'd get a phone call and he'd pick it up and he'd be like, okay, all right. He's like, and he'd repeat to me like what Hef said or, and a few times I actually had some notes. What was there was this one thing, I can't believe I can't remember it, but he loved this one pictorial and like made a note to me about how much he liked it. I have it printed out somewhere because it's just cool. Have Hef write something about what, your work. So my interaction with Hef was mainly that correspondence, like notes about work, but he still had his parties at the house. And the cool part was they were either the big Midsummer's Night Dream, which was so commercialized, but so fun. Like, honestly, people say those parties are amazing. I can't even imagine how incredible like the 70s and 80s were there because I felt like they were so much fun. And it was already like that decade, that time was over. And it was still like just the spectacle of like, I think the one party, it was all like these really tall women dressed as lamps. And that sounds strange, but so that they'd walk around the crowd serving hors d'oeuvres and things, but they were lit up. So you could always see these like beacons of light, like walking around. It's hard to explain, or like a Cirque du Soleil kind of thing where people are like swinging from areas and the food's amazing. And they always have some kind of band playing and they cut off the swimming in the grotto, but that's okay.
Oh, really? Because that was also like another famous thing, I feel like.
Picture Chris in the grotto area, like picking up the phone, acting like he's making a call, and he looks so James Bond because it's all stonework and so retro. And the Halloween parties were amazing. Like people really dressed up. We were walking through the crowd at one point and I always loved like all the playmates would come running over like, hey, and we'd say hi and hug. And Chris is standing there and I'm like, am I an idiot for bringing my husband to these things?
Yes.
And then this other group of women walk by and I look at Chris and I'm like, oh my God, did you see the soccer players? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, they're all naked. So they had
Soccer players.
The girls had their bodies painted like they were soccer players, like the soccer striped shirt, but it was paint. They were all naked, like just walking around. And I'm like, oh my God, they're naked. And he looks at me, he's like, where?
He missed it. So did you ever feel like you got any sort of blowback or pushback for being a woman working at Playboy?
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's so many layers to that. I mean, I was interviewed for, I think it was Inside Edition or something, and they were talking about the new revamp. And the first thing out of the interviewer's mouth was basically like, wow, you're not what I expected to be. Looking at you, I never expected, which is such a double sort of, I'm like, so let me get this straight. Like, I should be a man, or should I be offended? Or are you saying like it's unique to be like, there's so many things that, and I said, no, well, here I am, and really my perspective was always that going into it, I wanted to create something artful, and I had a love for Playboy like a lot of other women do, and in fact, that 40% of our readership, they said were women, which was surprising to me. And then when I started reaching out to younger generations to shoot, they were so eager and excited, like younger generations of women. And a lot of the shoots came together where they're like, oh my God, me and my girlfriend so-and-so, and she's a stylist, and we'll pull it together, and just a real sense of excitement. And then at one time, it was, I think, Lauren's birthday, and I sat at a table with a woman who asked what I did, and I told her, and I could see that she was not happy about it. And I said, look, I just feel like women should be able to do what they want to do. And, in hindsight, there's a lot of extraction of what that means to men, but don't we live in this world where everything has to mean something to men? And for my purpose, naive or whatever you want to say it is, I actually want to just do something without thinking about the men around me. And maybe that's foolish, but I do feel like if we could be really foresighted, we could reach an area where if a woman wants to be nude, it's not the impact it's going to make on the way men view her. It's going to be like what it means to her. And that's what's going to matter.
Totally.
And it's also ridiculous. I always use this as an example because it's so pertinent. We can watch The Walking Dead and people can lop off people's heads and pull guts out of their stomach, but you can't see a boob. Like, we can kill people.
Oh, no, it's so funny.
Right? But boobs are gross. Yeah. I just, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with people's bodies, is what I'm trying to say.
And especially if they want to show them, and if they want to be sexy, if that's their prerogative, I guess.
Right. But also, like, if you think of it as art and beauty, which, you could debate this forever, but you can look back in time, and I don't know, it depends what's going on in that culture, I guess, at the time. But, I just feel like we make women's bodies dirty by the way we think about that whole thing. Like, is it necessarily sexy? I don't know. Like, it depends who's looking at it. It could just be something that's gorgeous. And some of the photography, I wish I, had examples, but some of the photography that we shot that wasn't nude with like beautiful daylight, and like, it just was like these quiet moments that were gorgeous and could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. I mean, look at how you look at art that's on the wall, right? Like you walk into a gallery and a large portion of the dialogue is what you have going on in your head, So it's your application. It's this whole nature versus nurture situation, right? Playboy, yeah, we could get into a lot of things, but it was created initially because I think Hef really loved women. I know that there was a whole bunch of, but I've sat with the man and spoken to him. He just loved women for like all different kinds of reasons. And he did. He was like this romantic. He used to say that what you think of Playboy tells me more about you than it does the magazine. I think that's true. I think that the magazine evolved